What's going on, YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at something that I wanted to wait to talk about, but now it is official. We've gotten some more introspective on the New York Islanders' newest head coaching hire. It didn't take that long for the Islanders after firing Barry Trotz about a week and a half ago. The Islanders have brought in Lane Lambert, who has been the long-tenured assistant head coach of Barry Trotz. So, a couple weeks ago, it automatically brought up the question, when Lou Lamoriello had fired Barry Trotz, there was a lot of talk that he wanted a new voice in the room. And a lot of people said, all right, well, then it can't be Lane Lambert because Lane Lambert's been Barry Trotz's that has been his right-hand man. And then when it was announced that he was being hired, pretty much the reporters asked him, is he really a new voice? He's been with Barry Trotz for how long? How different is this going to really look? And I think that's when Lou kind of backpedaled and he said, yeah, you know what, maybe I didn't say that the exact way I meant for it to come out. But the point is still the same. He wants a different voice in that locker room, and he thinks that Lane Lambert brings the same mentality, just a different way of going about that. And and based off of what Lane Lambert said, you could kind of get a better idea of where he's coming from. So when asked about, did he talk to Barry when he was hired and stuff like that, and this is from Lane Lambert, he said, I talked to Barry last week early on after he had received the news, obviously, that he was fired. And he told me he was hoping that I would get the job. And then I just spoke to him not too long ago, and he used the words that he was thrilled. Yeah, I'm sure he was thrilled that his predecessor took his job. But obviously putting that aside, Lambert interviewed for the head coaching job over the past couple years. He was interviewed for the Colorado Avalanche back in 2016 when obviously they brought in Jared Bednar, who's been behind the bench. The Anaheim Ducks were the most recent team, which I was actually hoping he would get that job. As much as I like Dallas Eakins, the Ducks are really my second team. So if Lane Lambert went there in 2019, that would have been pretty cool. But his last head coaching job was with the Milwaukee Admirals of the American Hockey League. And that's when he was there from 2007 up until 2011. He held a pretty good record. He had 178 wins at the American Hockey League level. Over 300 games at that level as well. So really good experience in the professionals, just not at the NHL level. He had 4 straight playoff appearances as well during that time in Milwaukee. Trotz had supported Lambert. Lambert's a little bit younger at 57 years old, becoming an NHL head coach. And most recently, the most recent job that he was linked to was the Detroit Red Wings position. And Steve Yzerman had played with Lane Lambert on the Detroit Red Wings back in the 80s and 90s. So there is something to be said about that. He actually, funny enough, he actually roomed with Steve Yzerman in his rookie season. So there is something to be said that was a link there, potentially Lane Lambert going to the Detroit Red Wings. But now that seems like that will not come to fruition. So what we have to talk about is, so obviously Lane Lambert comes in. He was a pretty good coach. He coached in the WHL with Moose Jaw. He's kind of been all over the place. But he's really been, Barry Trotz's right-hand man. Like I said, he's been with him since, he was in Milwaukee, became an assistant with Barry Trotz in Nashville for plenty of years. Obviously, when Barry Trotz left Nashville, he joined him in Washington, won a Stanley Cup in 2018 with the Capitals, and then obviously we know the story in 2019 when he inevitably came to the New York Islanders. So since then, things have gone pretty well for him and the Islanders. And I think the big thing everybody's talking about with this hire, as an Islander fan, you're going to probably see more ice time from the younger players. I think that is a huge angle to cover here because under Barry Trotz, he wasn't letting the younger players play, and it was really stunting their development. Guys like Oliver Wahlstrom and Kiefer Bellows in particular. Artu Ratu, you could say that might be in the cards potentially as soon as this year. Really wasn't able to get anything out of Michael Dal Cole, who, remember, was a 5th overall pick. I think the damage was done the day he came in, but Michael Dal Cole, and plenty of other players. So when you look at where that kind of has gone, Barry Trotz just didn't have enough trust in playing the younger players, and that really hampered their development. It seemed like they took it the right way. It was, even Oliver Wahlstrom at the end of the season saying, hey, sometimes you need tough love, but that kind of gets to a point where it's actually hurting you. And I think he did get to that point. Now, here's the thing you have to remember too. So this was another theory, is that Barry Trotz was on the final year of his contract next summer. And what you have to remember here is, if he were to have retired and Lane Lambert leaves the team this year, right? Let's say he went to Detroit this summer. You have obviously Barry Trotz this year, and then you have nobody next year. And I think that's something we have to remember here. How much longer does Barry Trotz want to coach in the National Hockey League? Because when you consider that, if the Islanders, in terms of long-term investment, if they have Barry Trotz this season, great. They lose him next summer. You don't have Lane Lambert in line. Who else is there? Because you're not hiring, what's his name, from the American Hockey League. And I hate to be a dick like that, but you're not hiring Brent Thompson as your head coach. That is something in the Garth Snow era that would happen, not with Lou Lamoriello. Brent Thompson, listen, he was a good hockey player and everything, but he is not an NHL coach, at the very least for the New York Islanders in 2 years from now. So when you think of it in that terms, it does make sense. It's either you get rid of Trotz now and you have hopefully Lambert for the next couple years, and maybe they win a cup, right? 4 or 5 years. Hopefully, right? Or you lose Barry Trotz, you keep Barry Trotz next summer, then he retires, and now you're looking square one again. And that's why I think Lou Lamoriello really likes Lambert, and I think that's why he sees him as a high enough candidate and high enough value that, listen, as good as Barry Trotz has been, we didn't make the playoffs this year. His system just didn't work through an 82-game schedule. I think it's time that we go for the younger voice in Lane Lambert. And that's what the Islanders did. And I think all this stuff that he had issues with other players and Barzal and him had beef and this and that, I think that only comes out with a Lou Lamoriello team where nothing gets out. And the reason I say that is they have to make shit up because it's Lou Lamoriello. Nothing gets out from inside his cauldron, inside his fortress. Nothing gets out. So I think those are just rumors. I've talked about it. I've made comments with you guys in the comments that might be true. Now that it's been a little further along, I don't necessarily believe that. And I do think that Lane Lambert is going to be a great hire for the Islanders. He's a different voice. I think we're going to see more of the younger players. And I think he's going to keep the same structure, but he wants them to be more of an offensive, a high potent offensive threat. In Lane Lambert's press conference, he was mentioning the 2017-18 New York Islanders. That was under head coach Doug Weight. And Matt Barzal was a point-per-game player. Actually, he might have got to 82, 90. He might have been a point-per-game player, or maybe even gotten to 90 points that first season. Remember his line mate? John Tavares. So when you look back at what his capabilities are and what he's done recently, like 60 to 70 point seasons. Again, you have COVID in there, so remember that too. A lot of shortened seasons. But that is something that I think Lambert wants him to maybe, let the leash out a little bit more on players like Oliver Wahlstrom and Matt Barzal. And instead of making them, basically trying to fit a square peg into a circle hole, he's letting them play their game. And I think that is something that we really haven't seen in the Barry Trotz era with the Islanders, is he force fits guys into roles and they're not good at those roles, and you're not getting the best out of them. Now, obviously, Barry Trotz is the second best head coach in New York Islanders history, only behind the great Al Arbor, who actually has a banner in the stadium. Barry Trotz is second to that. And that, considering where the Islanders have been for so long, I know there was a lot of bad, feedback and bad PR for the Islanders firing Trotz. But the Islanders, this is Lou Lamoriello. And if you've learned anything from Lou, yes, he's going to make some tough moves, like the Devontae's trade a year later. That one hurts. But he's also made some really good moves. He's brought in Ilya Sorokin from the KHL. Semyon Varlamov, that was a questionable signing at the time. He's been a pretty good goalie for the Islanders. He's had his ups and downs, right? But he's still been a good goalie. And probably the reason they got Sorokin onto Long Island to play with the Islanders. You also have guys like Noah Dobson and Oliver Wahlstrom that he did draft. So those guys are doing well. And then you consider in year one, Robin Lehner, Valtteri Filppula, guys he brought in that at the time you were like, they brought in these guys, they brought in these bums, and they actually played really well for his system and the Islanders. So I think that's something you have to consider here. I think this year's going to prove just how good the success of the Islanders has been over the last couple years. Is it Barry Trotz behind the bench, or is it Lou Lamoriello putting the right guys on the roster for Barry Trotz to get the most out of those players for what they're doing? And I think we're going to get more of an idea of that this season when we see what Lane Lambert can do for the Islanders. So that's my take on the New York Islanders hiring Lane Lambert. It's a good hire for the team. It's a new voice. Listen, guys, the expectations have changed for the New York Islanders. This is not a team that, okay, we've gone to the conference finals twice. That's good. Let's keep everything the same. No, like this year, they showed maybe that there are some warts on this team that have to get fixed. And I think the Islanders do have a great roster. They've got a good structure, but unfortunately, the way the league kind of adapted to the Islanders, this is why the trap is not sustainable. It's not sustainable over an 82-game schedule, and unfortunately, it's not going to last through even a playoff run, but you have to even get yourself there. So let me know what you guys think. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and let's go Islanders.